Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the very first Broadband Story Slam. So this is the part of the day where we are going to have fun. I want to hear snaps. I want to hear enthusiastic support for these amazing storytellers that we have on the stage. So in conversations about broadband, as many of you know, it's really easy to hyper-focus on the data and the details. Conversations around infrastructure and all of these things are really important. But as everyone in this room knows, access to the internet, or lack thereof, has a lot of real, tangible consequences for the human lives of people living all around North Carolina. As someone in the storytelling field myself, I know how important human stories can be for helping us understand these big issues, for helping understand the nuance, the texture, the details of how big issues impact people's everyday lives. So in the next half hour, we are going to give you all a sample of the rich storytelling around these topics that exists in North Carolina. You're going to meet people from all around our state who have leveraged high-speed internet in transformative ways in agriculture, business, education, health, and beyond. And we're going to make it fun, as I said. So for those of you who aren't familiar with a story slam, the basic idea is we have storytellers who have 3 to 5 minutes to tell a story around a topic and tell it in their own words. They are not professional storytellers. They've put a lot of work into thinking about how to best tell their stories, so we want you to encourage them. At the 5-minute mark, you will hear this, and that bell means it is their time to wrap up, and we move on to the next story. At the end, I am going to sit down with the group and gain a little bit more insight into each of their stories, and we'll all move on in conversation together. So please give them love throughout the Story Slam. I know you all can do it. First up, John Mark Levin. He's the farm manager of J.C. Howard Farms.
Hi, my name is John Mark Levin, and I'm a 25-year-old farmer from Scotland County, North Carolina. I was born and raised in a family of 5 with 2 parents who were doctors. I've always wanted to be a farmer. In fact, so much so that I spent every spring break in both college and high school traveling with my grandfather all across the country looking at farm machinery, farm techniques, and farm equipment. My grandfather, John Curran Howard, is the most frugal, resourceful, and progressive farmer that I know. He's also my biggest mentor. My most fond memory is one spring break meeting him down in Memphis, Tennessee at the airport and renting a ruby red Chevy Impala and driving 1,500 miles in 3 days. I learned more in those 3 days than I did the entire year at school. When I chose to move home from Raleigh to Deep Run to work for my grandfather, I found myself in an internet desert. No Facebook, no Instagram, and least of all, Netflix. I couldn't even dream about using the agricultural software that I had dreamt about. My passion is using big data to improve agriculture. Big data for us in ag is really a way for us to grow more food using less resources, all while improving our environment and our soil. And you might ask, what is big data in farming today? A couple examples of this are soil sample data. So this soil sample data helps us determine where we do and where we don't need fertilizer. This has actually cut our fertilizer levels tremendously. Another example is weather and climate data. This helps us determine when we need to irrigate. So we're never over-irrigating or under-irrigating. Our crops are getting the exact amount of water that when they need it. And this has actually decreased the amount of water that we use. Yield data. This is a really exciting technology in ag right now because this essentially turns every single field into an experiment. This tells us where we excelled and where we were deficient, where the crops were good and where they were bad. And the thing about this was you can't do any of this without the internet. And that's where 2 years ago I found myself in this spot where I couldn't do this. And so that's when I decided it was time to do something. So on one of my trips with my grandfather in the Midwest, I noticed that a lot of the grain facilities there had receivers on them. So I looked into this and I found out that it was for internet transmission. And that's when we decided to put one on our own grain facility. We transmitted the internet signal we had at our grain facility to all the farms and homes in our community. My grandfather, he was a skeptic. He didn't think it was going to work, and he didn't see the benefit. However, this year we proved him wrong. So this year we had the hottest and driest May on record, which is a critical time for our corn production. In fact, my corn had 0 precipitation on it during the month of May. However, when the other farmers' corn was suffering from heat and drought stress, my corn was actually excelling. The reason for this being the precision land leveling that we've done. In fact, we use this to manage our water resources. We put a proper slope on the field that allows the water to infiltrate, but yet it has enough slope to where it won't pond. Water management is the #1 way to boost and improve yields in eastern North Carolina. In fact, my grandfather said we would never break 200 bushels per acre on a whole farm average. This year, because the most he'd ever done is 180. This year, we actually broke 227 bushels to the acre, which was outstanding. And this was all thanks to the internet and our ability to use it. We as North Carolina farmers can't compete unless we have internet. This internet allows us to compete with farmers in the Midwest and also across the world. Thank you.
Okay. Our next storyteller is Sharon Mervin. She's the Outreach Program Coordinator for STEM for All at the Neuse Regional Library. Please welcome Sharon.
Like she said, I am the Outreach Program Coordinator for STEM for All with the Neuse Regional Libraries in Kinston, North Carolina. Previously, or in a past life, I was an 8th grade English teacher with the Lenoir County school system. Now, what I did and what I prided myself on was issuing homework and assignments that were completely on the iPad, completely technology-based. I didn't have to worry about paper. I didn't have to worry about excuses. I could grade it. It was very efficient. I did not know at the time that I was a part of the 70% of teachers who assign technology-based homework, or that 30% of the students do not have access to broadband. I just didn't want to grade papers, and this worked. That was a past life. Currently in my job for STEM for All, we have the opportunity to take the library's resources into public housing for children who may not otherwise be able to come to the library. This is a happy story. So, through a grant from the state library, we've purchased hotspots, iPads, Osmos, playaways, art, STEM activity kits, anything that we could buy to accent these children's academic life right in their neighborhood. No one needs a ride to the library. No one has to worry about internet technology because we bring it with us. This is a happy story. So, the best part of the story is when you are able to mark growth. Here's the good part. So these students who are from kindergarten to 5th grade, we have about 20. We had such a turnout that we had to break it into 2 groups. So the K through 2 come on one day, 3 through 5 on another day. And Thursday, we realized that there was some homework gaps in there. These children didn't know what they should know for their levels. So what we did was take our fancy internet into public housing, and we brought IXL. We brought the internet. We brought YouTube videos. Now, to be honest, the YouTube videos were for us because we didn't know how to do their homework. We had to look it up. We sat there and just grunted and looked at each other like, Shonda, what is this? What is a decade? Because this isn't your mama's homework. This is something totally different. But the beautiful part of it is the children see us not know. They see us turn to the internet to look up the answers, and they see us apply it. The happiest part of the story is through the IXL programming that they're able to do on the iPads. They can see their growth. It's marked. On Thursdays, We give them their certificates. You've just mastered 100 skills in math. You've just mastered or answered 200 questions in reading. So they get their certificate, and because we're the library and we love books, we give them a book as well. And it is a prize for them. So this is what it looks like in about a minute. This is our typical STEM day. So the kids come through, they get their snack. I got homework. So we say, okay, they throw their book bag in the corner. We do our STEM activity, and then at the end, they do their homework. On Thursdays, they get a certificate. They get a certificate that verifies they know more today than they did yesterday. And they get to take that to school with them. So now these students who used to sit and didn't know what 2 + 2 was or what 12 + 2 was are now yelling out the questions for the kid at the other table, or they're trying to figure it out with their fingers, and they're getting it. But more than bridging the homework gap, we have bridged that gap, and the concrete mortar in there is the love that the people in this community got together and gave these kids an opportunity through technology to grow, and we gave them proof. Tell me that's not a happy story.
Our next storyteller is Tom Robinson. He is the Executive Vice President at ERD Industrial Electronic Repair.
You would think I'd be able to hold something electronic. It's a good day. It's a good week. My birthday is this week, so Anita has given me an hour to talk about my slam. No, I guess not. So what I've done is I've worn my lucky socks, just in case. So I'm ready to go. I'm going to have to hold this, I guess. Let's stand in front here. How many of you out there are global thinkers? Could I see your hands, please? Raise your hands. All right, great. I consider myself a global thinker, too, not only professionally, but also personally. And that was not always the case. And it rolls back to 2013, and my company, ERD Limited, Inc., we are an engineer-owned and operated electronics repair company. We're unique that we are engineer-owned. But back then, we did things traditionally. And then, in 2013, what took place was a disruption. We actually, at that time we had 14 employees and a little over 2,000 customers within the United States. And the disruption was we received 3 international outside of U.S. customers through the internet and our website. And let me tell you, our website was not very good. But what transpired after that, we said, now what if? What if we step back, and what if we became knowledgeable in international business? What if we became knowledgeable in the internet, search engine optimization? What if we became better doers and users of data? And then the big question happened. What if we changed our culture? Well, in 2013, we did that. And today, I'm very happy to say that it's impacted me not only in business, but also but a personal nature. ERD today is in 80 countries. We now have over 20 employees. We have over 6,000 customers, of which 1,000 are international, in big, big names. We're very, very proud of that. Our leading industry is something that you're all connected with. We are involved with the semiconductor industry, and there's a good possibility that the phones that you have and the chips that you have, we were involved in the producing. If you have currency in your pocket, well, there's a good possibility that we've repaired through the Bureau of Engraving the money that you have. Now, my question to you is, how many of you today can say that you received a phone call from Los Alamos National Laboratories? Anybody? I can. That was last week. We also have been involved with the Air Force from the standpoint of the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile System. We have on our internet translations to over 100 languages now. We have over 1,000 videos on YouTube, and we have another 500 in queue. We're doing all kinds of interesting things. But personally, what's happened for me is it's made me an international citizen. I travel the world. I've been very fortunate to deal with many, many cultures. But more importantly, from a personal standpoint, I've gotten involved with the community, the universities, and small and medium-sized businesses. I chair a couple of fairly successful, I think they're successful, nonprofits that are driven to connecting those three together. I sit on a number of national boards. But the important thing is disruption. This little cord that I have in my pocket today, ladies and gentlemen, is a disruptor. We talk about the internet and high speed, we're talking about disruption and being able to embrace it and use it. And I would really hopefully suggest that we bring it to every corner of the state, every community, every household, every university, every high school, a grade school, to every household, because it is so important to our future. We have to embrace disruption. Thank you.
And our last storyteller, Kim Schwartz. She is the CEO of Roanoke Chowan Community Health Center.
Good morning, everybody. 15 years ago, I moved from New Mexico to northeastern North Carolina. I had a few things to learn. So when you walk out of a room, you cut out the light. There are these beautiful orange crackers with this brown stuff in the middle. Those are called nabs, and they are delicious. Turkey shoots, nothing to do with turkeys. And if you are invited to a pig picking, you will not be going to your local barnyard and picking out the cutest little piggy to take home for you as a pet. Shock to my system. As the CEO for a federally qualified health center based out of Ahoskie, North Carolina, there were some other things I realized very quickly that were a little more tragic. Our mortality rates, our health care infrastructure, the lack of chronic disease management. And when you look at a map of North Carolina and you look at do the counties by colors, we have our lighter shades for the good folks that are doing a great job. You know where you are. And as it gets worse, it gets darker and darker and darker, and you land in northeastern North Carolina with the darker colors. We had to do something radical 14 years ago. So I came from New Mexico, which, by the way, mark this out, those of you who are legislators, we've had telehealth reciprocity there for over 20 years. We don't have that in North Carolina. So we started a remote patient monitoring telehealth program. So the thing is, we could see what was going on with a patient every 3 to 4 months. Our premise was if we could monitor a patient daily, we could see what was going on a regular basis and maybe head off some bad things at the pass. We also recognized that we had to have critical partnerships, something you all know as well, too. So we aligned very early on with the Divine Nine. Who are members here? Divine Nine, thank you very much. Shout it out. That is the black sororities and fraternities established in the early 1900s, and they're great service organizations. So we got them on board so that when they heard about this from their providers, they would not be shocked. So Miss Lily, a Delta, by the way, her doctor said to her, I want you to be monitored at home. Miss Lily has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, heart disease, and diabetes. She was a faithful monitor. Her scales, her blood pressure cuff, her pulse ox, her diabetes monitor, she did it faithfully. Her nurse, Rhonda, would monitor her daily, catch some things that were happening, and we kept her out of the hospital. Well, about after 8 weeks, Rhonda started noticing something odd. Every Tuesday morning, Miss Lily's blood pressure was up a little bit, her weight was up a little bit, her blood sugars were elevated, and in her branching logic questions she reported back, she wasn't feeling so good on Tuesdays. So what question did she ask herself? Wonder what Miss Lily's doing on Mondays. So she called her up, and she said, Miss Lily, tell me about your Mondays. Miss Lily said, well, I go to lunch every Monday with my sorors. And Miss Rhonda said, well, where do you go? And she said, well, name the restaurant. And while she's talking on the phone, Rhonda pulls up the menu. Well, what do you order, Miss Lily? Oh, they're fried catfish, and those collards will make your mama scream. Well, Rhonda says to her, how about a couple other options? This might help a little bit. So the next Tuesday, before Rhonda could even pull up Miss Lily's dashboard, Miss Lily calls her and she says, Rhonda, my blood sugars are good. My blood pressure's the same as it was on Monday, and I'm feeling good today. Was all it took for me to just eat something different to feel better? Well, what else can I do? Talk about a teachable moment. Well, I will tell you, we have monitored literally thousands of patients all across the country out of Ahoskie, North Carolina. Not been paid for a single one of those except for outside of grants. Not why we do it, of course. Be nice to get paid, however. And Miss Lily, who was in her late 70s when we signed her on to RPM, was not going to make it to 80. And I'm here to tell you that she lived to the ripe old age of 88. She was a champion for her sorority, she was a champion for telehealth, and she was a champion for wellness. Today, the chair of our board of directors, Delta, my CMO, AKA, we are doing divine things in Eastern North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you all. Wonderful stories, and I didn't even have to use my little dinger. Everyone was right on time. So we're going to chat a little bit now to dig deeper into some of the stories that you all heard and the experiences of the storytellers on stage. And John Mark, I want to start with you. And I have a question about your grandfather. So you described him at times kind of reluctant as you all transitioned to using this new technology. How does he feel about it now? And I guess how does he represent kind of the generation in your community who didn't grow up using this kind of technology in farming?
Well, I'd say now that he, well, in his own words, he says we can't farm without it. You know, it's really hard to show the benefits with this technology over just 1 year. But now that we've had 2 or 3 years under our belt and he's really seen the improvements, and you know, it really started with him saying, well, you can't do that. You won't be able to break that yield goal. And now that we've done it not just 1 year, but 2 or 3 years in a row, you know, small increments. This last year was the biggest jump we've seen, but in small increments, he's really become a believer. And what's really been amazing to me is that people in his generation, especially the older farmers, because that's the demographic they are, they're, you know, 60 plus, they're some of the most progressive people I know, and then the most willing people to go out there and try new technology. Just to give you an example, my grandfather, he probably can't turn on a computer right now, but last week he went and bought an iPhone. Oh, wow. So there's a real willingness out there for them to try this new technology because they want to compete. They see that they're going to have to compete with farmers in the Midwest and all over the country, and they want to compete, and they know that technology is the way they can do that.
Well, Sharon, that kind of relates to your story about these students who now feel like they can compete or at least be on par with their peers in the classroom because of access. For kids that are in their community around them that don't get access to this program, how much of a difference does it make? Are there any tangible examples that you can see?
The tangibility, I think, is just with the enthusiasm that the kids have for coming, because now they feel that they actually have a voice in class because they have a background through the IXL program and through the STEM and their critical thinking that they've gathered through the STEM activities that we've done for them. I really can't speak for any of the other kids that don't have broadband, but I'd have to imagine that just seeing the enthusiasm and the change in the kids in the class, I'm pretty sure their teachers can attest to it as well. I get to see the report cards, sometimes before the parents do, that I see that these kids are now getting better grades than they were about 6 months ago.
And how are their parents responding to them having access to this technology?
The parents love it, and we often get testimonies about how excited the kids are about coming to STEM. A lot of the emphasis is homework help because a lot of parents can't help the kids with the homework, and maybe they don't have technology at home. Because we bring it with us, then we're able to give them that.
That's awesome. So Tom, you talked a lot about this idea of internet as a disruptor. And as you reflect on kind of what you heard in each of these stories and what you've seen in your own business, can you kind of give us an example of what that looks like on the ground? You mentioned, I think you talked earlier when we spoke about cruise ships and the work that you all do there.
Right. One of the industries that we're involved with is the cruise industry. And it's not unusual for us to Skype cruise ships around the world to answer questions and problems and challenges that they have technologically. That said, I want to put out a disclaimer. If you hear anything negative about the cruise lines, we had nothing to do with it. Okay. But you know, there seems to be an underlying theme and current with everyone that was up here this morning, and it has to do with the use of knowledge and information, aka data. And the better we are to cull the data, the better we are to direct it to what we need for it to do in order to make our jobs, our lives, other people's lives, and then our community better, is really what it's about. And yes, it is a disruptor, but it's a positive type of disruptor if we embrace it. And the important part of that is to embrace it and make it your own and take the types of risk that need to be taken. Nothing is gained by staying in neutral, particularly in this day and age where if you do, you're going to get run over. And it's okay to make mistakes. The story of ERD, I could tell you we made maybe 1/2 of a mistake. No, I'm only kidding. But the point is that we're challenged. We're challenged because not only are we competing with the person across the street and down the road, and within the state and within your counties, but within the United States, but we're now competing with the world. And to not acknowledge that and not to use all the power that we have to bring forward the types of challenges that we need to overcome to become better, I think is being very blind. So,
yeah. Anyway. Well, it brings up this question of agency, I guess, and I heard that a lot in your story, Kim, of how access to information and access to your own health information gives you a sense of agency and greater control over your own experience, which doesn't always happen in the healthcare system, as many of us know. So could you give us a little bit more detail about other kinds of patients or individuals who have felt a greater sense of agency through telehealth?
So the exciting part about that is that the information's there for the patient as well, too, so that they can see it daily as well. And then aligning that very strongly with what they see on a day-to-day basis. You know, I think about a story of a woman that had kidney disease, and she had twins, and so she was very, very sick, and in fact, they didn't think she was going to live, and she ended up having a kidney transplant. And her doctor, her primary care doctor, connected all of that with their disease specialist as well, too. So it wasn't just about the primary care. So we were able to connect all that information to any specialist as well, too. So the whole wraparound pieces so that everybody's seeing the same thing at the same time. You know, if we're going to change things like this, we have to change policy. So to be able to see the record across the board, I know every one of you have gone to a doctor's office and they ask you the same darn questions every time. When if we had connectivity across the state and our health records were all accessible, then that would make a whole lot more sense. And that's about policy and not being so scared. I love what you said, Tom, and every one of us here, I think there's a theme about risk and stepping out there and leaning in. And we are going to make mistakes, and there are issues around privacy. But we have to own that and take good care of that. Folks in John's generation, they don't care so much about the privacy piece. You know, I have to get over that a little bit. But being able to really understand from your own perspective how you can improve on your own health or get better or help your neighbors and your friends, having that information is so critical and not waiting for it. So I think I'm just been checking my blood. Seeing my heart rate's elevate a little bit today. So that's just the information. And what do we do with that information? We make sure it's relevant and meaningful, and we connect to the people that can help us with that.
Talk about the younger generation piece, John, and what you see or hear from your peers about being willing to move back home or move to parts of the state that maybe have less connectivity than where they went to school or job opportunities they have in other parts of the area.
So that's a real challenge, and that's something that people in my generation really are looking at. Nobody wants to move back home to essentially move back in the Stone Age. I mean, when you come home and can't watch Netflix, in my generation, that's devastating.
Mine too.
But it's also, this is, in my generation in farming, I see the internet as, like you said, it's all about data and it's all about knowledge. And so those 2 years that I lived on my farm and we didn't have internet, we weren't able to progress like we have in the last 3. I find that, my grandfather's generation, that's why we rode around, is so we could learn from other people. Well, now I can get on the internet, on my phone, literally that night, and research the same thing that he used to have to drive from state to state to state, 1,500 miles in 3 days just to learn. And so that's why I think it's really powerful. And, if we want to encourage people to come back, we really have to make those tools available.
Yeah. Sharon, what do you feel like are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about broadband and education and the role that it plays and access to the internet to promote educational opportunities?
Well, the largest thing that I think that I learned personally was that I really thought that it was everywhere, that it was truly accessible. I didn't consider the demographics that are into play, the way people live their lives or anything like that. I wasn't a part of this program, the STEM for All program, when I first started. I came in afterwards, but the idea that the public housing complex that we go into is literally up the street and around the corner. But the gap that we talk about with the importance of having the internet is literally that small. It's a really small gap, but we still needed to take it to them. And before, like when I was a teacher, the kids had iPads. They had iPads that they were able to use for the entire year. I never thought that maybe the parents didn't have the internet at home, or that if you were kind of tight on your budget, the internet would be the first thing to go. I just wanted you to turn in your homework.
Yeah.
So I could grade it because I had my own things that I needed to do as a teacher. But with these children, the way that their faces light up when we come in with the iPads and these technology things that they can do and that they're learning at the same time is really important. Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Oh, okay, just checking.
Well, we're going to have to close out in a second, but I'd love for the two of you to kind of end reflecting on this idea of misconceptions and kind of what you hope people walk into this day thinking about in terms of the impact that access has had for your business, for your own, and maybe let's drill it down really personally. For you personally, what is the biggest thing that access has done to change your ability to do your job?
Okay. Ladies first. Always.
I will just say, move knowledge, not people. Move knowledge, not people. And able to have the access to do that. My chief medical officer, Claudia Richardson, lives in Potocacy. No internet access there. She's that last mile. She has to come to the office and work there. And one of the other things, she goes to Chesapeake and stays at a hotel so she can internet access there and be able to swim. So I'm just going to tell you, move knowledge, not people.
Well, I could just add that although we're moving knowledge and not people, everything is about people. Business, we always talk in terms of business, the internet. It always is about people. And, that old saying that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link is very, very true. We need to strengthen our chain. And when I say disruptor, that's kind of the modern day buzzword for change. We need to embrace change. We need to embrace it for what it is. And what it is a path to being successful, not only as an individual, but as a community, as a state, and as a nation, because it's coming. Whether we like it or not, we need to embrace it. That's about it.
Okay, can we get a round of applause for our storytellers?